Hello and welcome to the FanDuel Punch-Out. I'm Big Italy 42 here talking about tonight's slate. And as always on a Tuesday, we got nice huge slate of action and some big names on the mound. So let's go ahead and get things started here. Clayton Kershaw, as always, your most expensive pitcher, $13,400, facing off tonight against the Oakland Athletics in Oakland. We know this is a huge ballpark. We also know this is a team that doesn't strike out a ton. Obviously, Kershaw is going to find his way to get his strikeouts that many other pitchers wouldn't be able to get. But 6.5 run total here, minus 230 favorite, obviously. Clayton Kershaw and his 15.5% swinging strike rate tend to think he's going to find a way to get himself 8 to 10 strikeouts in this game like he seems to in every other game. Obviously, he's the top pitcher on the board, a weak, struggling offense, an offense that's particularly not good against left-handed pitchers. So if you can afford Kershaw, he's the way you want to go. There's a game in Coors Field today. I'll give you more of my thoughts on that here in a few minutes. But you want to get some batters from that. I don't think that it's necessarily a must. There's plenty of other fine spots. And if you want an elite pitcher like Kershaw, it's going to be really tough to fit them in. Other options, Jacob deGrom, $11,600 against Baltimore. Yesterday, we talked about Sonny Gray and his potential against Baltimore. He had an okay game, struggled at times, gave up a home run. Should have been out of the inning, gave up an error, then a single, then a home run. Kind of killed his night there. Threw a lot more pitches than we liked. Not quite the strikeouts, but Jacob deGrom, certainly the guy who is capable of striking out a ton of these Baltimore bats, even in Camden. He's got a 26.9% strikeout rate, swinging strike rate north of 12. So this is a guy with huge potential tonight, despite the tough ballpark. Unfortunately, though, because of the Mets offense and the fact that it is in Camden Yards, it is only a 7.5 run total, but it's a pick'em currently. So if you're paying that kind of price tag, you want a guy that, especially on FanDuel, you want the guy that's more guaranteed to get the win. So, Jacob deGrom, kind of a toss-up, obviously a much better offense on the opposite side there. Francisco Liriano, your other option up at the top, facing off against Arizona. Arizona that got to Garrett Cole last night as the chalk pitcher, kind of sunk a lot of similar lineups last night with him. Liriano, $9,700 in an okay spot. Like we said, this is an Arizona team that is better against lefties. They're fine against righties, as we saw last night. But Liriano's been a guy who has been solid all season long. He comes in as a minus 210 favorite, a 7-run total. So he gives you, the higher likelihood for the win that Jacob deGrom doesn't really possess. And he does possess still tons of strikeout upside, 27.2% strikeout rate, 14% swinging strike rate, one of the best in all of baseball. He's great at keeping the ball on the ground, 53.6%. So this is a guy that, has massive upside. Really the only thing that concerns you with him is his 8.8% walk rate. But in this matchup tonight, it is a pitcher's park. I tend to think that Liriano maybe slightly better value than Jacob deGrom because he is a little bit less risky. And he's at home, and he's a much, much bigger favorite. So I like him. Other guys I'm looking at, I really like James Shields at $8,700. James Shields is a pitcher that earlier in the season was striking out a ton of batters, but also a ton of home runs. He's done much better with both recently. Has also pitched much better at home, obviously being at Petco Park. Strikeout rate this season still at almost 26%. Swinging strike rate at 13. So there's a lot to like with him, especially against a team in Atlanta that just is not very good right now. I mean, they weren't that good with Freddie Freeman. Obviously, Freddie Freeman's still on the shelf. And Petco Park, certainly a ballpark that helps you out when you make mistakes. Not all those mistakes find the seats like they would in a smaller ballpark. And this is also an Atlanta team that's 25th in the league over the past 30 days. Just a 288 team WOBA, 113 team ISO. Zero power. I mean, this team has the third lowest ISO over the last 30 days of any team in baseball. So if you're looking for a guy that doesn't come with a lot of risk, James Shields is that guy. $8,700, a great price for him. Elsewhere, you're looking at other options. One interesting option for me is Anibal Sanchez is $8,300. Another one of those guys that does not come without risk. Actually has not been particularly good recently. He's given up 8 or more hits in 4 of his last 6 games, and one of those other ones gave up 7 hits. So this is a guy that just hasn't been particularly good. He's been walking more batters than you like, but he does have strikeout upside, and the Cubs provide that for you because they strike out second most of any team in baseball against right-handed pitching. So Anibal Sanchez, what you don't like here is the home run issues. 1.63 home runs per nine can be a major issue in this ballpark. So if he's able to keep the ball in the park, I love him as a GPP play. Certainly a guy that could easily go out there and pitch 3 innings and get crushed, but he's a guy who could also go 6-7 innings, get you 8 or 9 Ks. 8.5 run total here. He's a plus 140 underdog, so his ownership will certainly be low. Don't you dare play him in your cash games, and if you do, blame someone else. But he's a guy that, if you're making multiple GPP lineups, he's a guy that certainly has the potential to put up a nice game at his price tag. So I'll look at him a little bit. Other guys cheaper. Mentioning the other side of the Jacob deGrom game. This is something we've talked about a lot of times where if you target the other side against an ace, especially an ace who has a bad offense behind him like Jacob deGrom, you're instantly going to get low ownership because deGrom will be a popular play, guys like that. And Gossman's a guy who's actually pitched pretty well recently. He's had his ups and his downs, but 3 of his last 4 games, 12 or more fantasy points on FanDuel, and he only got the win in one of those. And against some okay teams, I mean, Seattle, one of the hottest offenses in baseball, and he went 7 innings with 8 Ks against them, gave up 3 earned runs. Game against Detroit, it was right before Miggy came back. Got hit by the Angels. Seems like he's the only guy the Angels have hit recently. But at $6,500, I think he provides you some upside for cheap, so I certainly like him in some tournaments. Outside of that, not a whole lot really stands out. You've got some interesting guys you can consider, like Eduardo Rodriguez. This is a Cleveland team that struggles mightily with left-handed pitching, but they've added some right-handed bats. They've got some other guys back, so certainly a risky play at $7,400. But, I mean, we have seen his upside. We've also seen his downside. I mean, an inning and 2/3 outing against the Angels with no strikeouts. He had 8 strikeouts in 5 innings against Houston. I mean, he's been very up and down, very roller coaster type of ride with him. So a guy that, you don't love, but I don't mind getting some exposure to him in GPPs. As far as cheap guys, if you needed a cash game play, I feel like Gausman's really the only guy I would consider. And I don't even love that. But if you just have to have a cheap guy to play in your cash games so that you can load up on some big bats, I think that's probably the way that I'd be going. One more guy to mention, got to mention him. Hasn't been the strikeout pitcher this year that he was last year. Jake Odorizzi, $8,800, facing off against Houston, as we know, one of the highest strikeout rates in all of baseball. In fact, one of his better starts recently was against them. Went 5 2/3 with 5 Ks, got the win, didn't give up any earned runs, 3 walks, 2 hits. His problem is he doesn't pitch deep into games because he throws too many pitches. So swinging strike rate, not where you'd like it to be, 9.8%. Doesn't have a ton of upside, but he's certainly a guy that could rack up some strikeouts against a free swinging Houston team. So keep him on your tournament radar. All right, moving over here to catcher. Brian McCann had a monster game last night as we expected. Maybe we didn't quite expect a home run of 5 RBIs and 3 hits, but he was the top play last night. Hard to argue him being the top play once again today. Mike Pelfrey had that weird little stretch earlier in the season where he was pretty good, but 340 WOBA allowed to lefties this year. Brian McCann's your top play. Another guy, Kyle Schwarber, certainly got to be considering him. Mentioned Anibal Sanchez struggles with the long ball. Kyle Schwarber's got 8 of them already, a couple double-dog games already too, so certainly a guy you're looking at. Elsewhere, Yan Gomes tonight gets a lefty, Eduardo Rodriguez, so I certainly like him. I think my cash game play, though, as it will likely be for quite a few people, is John Jaso against Scott Feldman. Scott Feldman hasn't been terrible, but this is an average pitcher at best. He's actually only given up a 298 WOBA to lefties this year, but John Jaso leading off, park shifts into Houston at Minute Maid Park, and I mean, the guy's just been consistent. He gets hits even when he's been coming off the bench. He's had 2 pinch hits recently, and both times he reached base. So, I mean, obviously that doesn't mean a whole lot, but what it does mean is that he's been batting at the top of an order that's been absolutely on fire. He's been consistent. $2,500, a great cheap price tag for him. Another guy to consider, Victor Martinez, $3,000. Jason Hamill, I'm not sure what's going on with Jason Hamill. He hasn't been very good at all recently. I mean, way overpriced. Hasn't pitched more than 5 innings in any of his last 5 starts. So not exactly sure what's going on there, but even when he has been in, he hasn't been particularly effective. And now that this Detroit offense is healthy, certainly not one I want to target. And when I can get cheap pieces, I want to do that. Speaking of pieces of the Tigers, Miguel Cabrera had his first big game since coming back. 2 for 3 with a double, a homer, 3 RBIs, 2 walks, 12.75 fantasy points. Now he gets to hit in Wrigley Field against Jason Hamill, who has been struggling, so you got to like him. Chris Davis, he's always a tournament option. I'm certainly not targeting Jacob deGrom with anyone. Other options for you, Paul Goldschmidt in tournaments. He is hitting a lefty. It is Francisco Liriano, who's a very good lefty. But whenever he's facing a lefty, I get some exposure in tournaments. A pair of guys right around, or a trio of guys right around $4,000. Anthony Rizzo once again against Sanchez. Joey Votto against his old teammate Edison Volquez. We know how consistent Votto's been. He has an extra base hit, at least one extra base hit in 5 of his last 6 games. He seems to reach base every single game. I mean, he's got a WOBA, or an on-base percentage north of 500 since the All-Star break. So, great cash game play. Eric Hosmer, another one of those guys, just never gets the respect he deserves. But you look at his game logs, and over his last 8 games, his worst game was 3.5 fantasy points. So, Eric Hosmer absolutely on fire. Raisel Iglesias has struggled with lefties and hard contact, so I like him quite a bit. Of course, you're looking at Coors guys as well. Ryan Zimmerman at 3,900, Ben Paulson at 32. Neither one stands out as an incredible play to me, but if you're trying to save money, I don't mind going with either one. Elsewhere, you can look at Albert Pujols against the lefty and Danks. Pujols has now homered in 2 of 3 games. We've seen this early in the season. He struggles, and then he gets hot, so maybe it means something, maybe it doesn't, but certainly his price tag at $3,600 far too cheap against a guy like Danks who really struggles against right-handed pitching. Mark Teixeira did leave last night with a bruised lower leg. If he's back in the lineup, though, $3,400 against a bad pitcher in Mike Pelfrey, he's going to be a very popular play, and rightfully so. Looking for cheaper guys, there's not a whole lot that stands out. Matt Whistler does have significant issues with left-handed batters, and it's not to chase the home run he hit last night, but Yonder Alonso at $2,900 is an interesting play. Not a guy with a lot of power, but certainly a guy that puts the ball in play. And then C.J. Cron at $2,500. He homered last game. He homered the time he started before that. Now he faces John Danks. So $2,500 makes for probably my favorite cheap tournament play at first base. Second base options, love Brian Dozier at $3,500 against CC Sabathia. We know the drill by now. Sabathia has been terrible against righties for a few years now. 21 homers already allowed. I was looking forward to these Twins bats yesterday. All I had to do was wait a day, and I'm back on board with them. So, other guys to consider here. You've got D. Gordon. I'm sorry, I lost my list. D. Gordon, $3,400. Facing off against Tyler Cravey. This guy now hitting the ball at a nice clip once again. He's got 6 multi-hit games in his last 10. Finally stolen a base in back-to-back games. Wasn't that aggressive on the base paths there for a little while. You can consider Anthony Rendon, but he just has been awful recently. I mean, he's got 1 extra base hit in his last 10 games. He just hasn't been very good. I mean, I know he's in Coors against David Hale, who hasn't been very good against anyone, but I mean, he's more of a tournament play for me, not a guy that I'm actively targeting. I still love Cesar Hernandez at $3,100. He's in a fine spot against Dickey. Should be batting up top of that order once again. Brandon Phillips against Edison Volquez. He's $3,100. Not a bad, cheap price. Another guy, Enrique Kike Hernandez, whatever you'd like to call him, $2,400. If he's in the lineup today against the lefty, he has massive numbers against lefties. And Felix Doubront, incredibly bad against righties especially, but really against everyone. So one more guy that I really like here, if you're looking for a cheap guy, nice cash game play here, and that's Colton Wong. Comes in at $2,700. Ryan Vogelsong, on the other hand, is awful against lefties. $374 WOBA allowed. Big time split there. It's not good for him that there's so many St. Louis Cardinals bats that hit lefty. So quite a few more of those coming on my list here. Third base options, you got to like Nolan Arenado at home against Jordan Zimmerman. Zimmerman's been a fine pitcher, but I mean, it's Arenado at Coors. He's only $4,900. It's expensive comparatively, but I mean, still $600 less than Josh Donaldson, who, by the way, is always in play in tournaments. Facing Aaron Nola, who has been good, but has struggled with the long ball, and Josh Donaldson's pretty good at hitting long balls, so certainly like him in tournaments. Matt Carpenter, another one of those lefties from St. Louis, picking on Ryan Vogelsong. He's $3,900. I don't love the price tag, but he's certainly in play. A pair of Minnesota bats again. Miguel Sano homered again last night. Had 3 hits. His teammate Trevor Plouffe, you want the lower ownership. Obviously not quite the power, but certainly still has upside against lefty. He's got great numbers against lefties throughout his career. Todd Frazier is only $2,900 against Edison Volquez at home. You certainly prefer targeting lefties with him because he has a ton of power against lefties, but solid power against righties as well. And then a couple cheap plays for you. Derek Dietrich is nice and cheap. And the final guy that I'm looking at here is a guy that's probably going to fly a little bit under the radar, but he's been hitting pretty well. Assuming that he's in the lineup tonight, that's Pablo Sandoval. He had back-to-back big games. Maybe that was because the Red Sox were hot. Hard to say. He was 0-4 yesterday, but only 2,500. Trevor Bauer is a guy who, when he doesn't have it going, he's definitely prone to implosion. So I don't mind going down that route if you need to. Shortstop options, I don't love a lot. You got to like Ian Desmond with his power at Coors Field. He's had some big games now, up to 15 homers on the year. He's got tons of pop in his bat. I like him no matter where he hits in that order. Carlos Correa is another option, as he always is. Hits the ball a ton. Jose Reyes for $3,400 in Coors Field. I keep mentioning how I don't think he has much upside. He still hasn't shown it. Not a single, actually only one game of 2 points or more in the last 10 games, and it was exactly 2 points. So 2 extra base hits, that's it. I mean, he's stolen only 1 base, no power. He's an okay option there. If Colorado has a big game, you expect he'll be a big part of it, but not a guy I'm expecting big things out of once again. You can go back to the well here with your cheap guys, Alcides Escobar, Gene Segura. Take your pick there. Both guys really cheap. And then once again, I still like Eugenio Suarez. Edison Volquez has been a fine pitcher this year, but he's actually been better against lefties than righties. So Eugenio Suarez has been hitting everyone pretty well. Over his last 8 over his last 2 games, but certainly some big-time upside, only 2,500. Outfield options. Bryce Harper is your top overall hitter on the day. You got to pay a pretty penny for him, though, $5,700. But Bryce Harper, probably one of a handful of bats that you just love to at least watch play in Coors Field. And if you don't have him, sweat about it the whole time probably. But some other options you've got, Andrew McCutchen against Chase Anderson at home, $5,000 for him. The other Colorado bats, Gonzalez, Blackman, $4,900 and $4,400 respectively. Mike Trout's only $4,700 against John Danks. So take that for what you will. Hasn't been great recently, but still the best hitter in baseball for much, much cheaper than he should be. $1,000 less than Bryce Harper, who is in Coors. So you do the math there on what the ownership will likely be. Ryan Braun gets another lefty. Had a fine game last night. He was 2 for 3 with an RBI and a walk. The team itself didn't pan out how we would have liked it to, but definitely like him. Lorenzo Cain, I like against anyone. Raisel Iglesias has good stuff, but is not a consistent pitcher, so I'm targeting him as well. Other guys to look at, I like the outfielders for the Twins. Aaron Hicks, Torrey Hunter, whoever you like there. I'm really not going out of my way to target a lot of these other hitters from Washington, Colorado. There's not a lot of them in particularly good form. I know Coors Field amplifies everything, but I'm not forcing these guys in my lineup. They fit, and that's fine, but I'm not trying to go out of my way to get them. Some other guys, Gregory Polanco, finally let us down last night, but I'll go back to the well, $3,300 for him. Great cash game play there. Same thing goes for those lefties from Houston once again. Colby Rasmus, Preston Tucker, both those guys in good spots again. Jake Odorizzi's been tough, but been more of a contact pitcher this year, so I don't mind targeting him just a little bit there. And then as you're looking for cheap guys, you've got a few that are in okay spots. One guy who just came up recently, we know he's got a ton of power. Marcelo Ozuna is min salary against Tyler Cravey in a righty-righty matchup. So give him a look if you're looking for a cheap source of some power. Obviously, a nice park shift for him playing at Miller Park. Another one of those guys, Mark Trumbo, facing off against Chichi, Alex Gonzalez, whatever you like to call him. Another cheap source of power there at $2,200. And then, of course, you've got some other guys you want to look at. Michael Kadire, $2,300. Had a big game when he first came back, has struggled since then, but we know he's a better hitter than what that price indicates. And the only other real cheap guy you're looking at is Shane Victorino. And that is going to wrap things up. Thanks for hanging out with us. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. And check out all of our great content, our optimizer, lots of great stuff at dailyfantasycafe.com.